A family can be made up in many different ways.
It's called SOGI, for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identification, a curriculum that teaches public school students across Canada to celebrate the homosexual lifestyle and that gender is fluid. In other words, your gender is not dependent on what parts you were born with, but rather what you feel like in the moment.
There's people that are boys, there's people that are girls, there are people whose gender might be a little bit of both, or might even be neither.
Lessons include books about transgender children, such as 10,000 Dresses, and songs like The Rainbow Song.
Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
The SOGI curriculum started in British Columbia in 2016 and is quickly spreading throughout Canada.
I just thought, who decided that this was okay to teach our children?
Author and inspirational speaker Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson is a leading voice against the SOGI curriculum.
And we are seeing the results of that now, because some kids are reacting very emotionally and saying, and they're in fear. Will I suddenly struggle with feeling like a different gender inside of my body?
Carrie Simpson of Culture Guard, another leading opponent, calls the curriculum nothing short of child abuse.
All those beautiful qualities that make young girls, beautiful girls and women, are being basically vilified. The things that make our boys boys are being, taken from them. So things of equating young men to being strong protectors is something that's now evil.
But Morgan Auger, a transsexual and supporter, claims it's about acceptance, not indoctrination.
The idea is to teach kids that there are gay kids and there are trans kids and there are trans parents and gay parents in our society, and everybody's wanted and desired. After all, that's what our Human Rights Code says, and it's the role of schools to teach the following of our laws, right?
Simpson disagrees, saying she sees SOGI's real goal as
altering our culture from a heteronormative society into one where anything goes, no boundaries, no values, no morals. It's a hedonistic cult, basically, what they're implying.
Another blaring example, drag queen story time. It's happening in Canada and America, where some public schools and libraries invite drag queens, some dressed like horned demons, to read to young children.
And it's a social deconstructionist agenda. They're using children, little 5-year-olds, to accomplish this. And parents are waking up and saying no.
Okay, stay with me here. The Board of Representatives in the city of Stamford, Connecticut, has voted to ban the use of gender pronouns from its governing rule book. That means people can't be referred to as he or she in the city's written rules. Don't they have bigger problems in Connecticut? Get me up to speed on the pronouns, because in New York, you can't use he or her or she or him at all. I guess you have to use Z or her, Z-E or H-I-R, or you can use they or their, and you can be fined if you don't use the right pronoun in New York. You actually can be fined. No. So you're not quite there. So explain your situation.
To be honest, I'm not too up to date on New York State's laws, as my stuff happens in Connecticut. But really, my goals here, the issues that we were trying to tackle were simply the rules of the board. We're not looking to ban terminology. Quite the opposite. I think I lead the charge in allowing people to use their pronouns. I don't want to tell someone, no, you can't be a he, and no, you can't be she. Quite the opposite. Use what makes you happy. Use what makes you feel right.
Some folks may think civilization is on the rise, but religious freedom certainly isn't. In the world right now, some 250 million Christians face persecution. That means 1 out of 12 face some sort of danger where they live just because of their faith.
Every year, the anti-persecution group Open Doors puts out the World Watch List, subtitling it this year, the 50 countries where it's most dangerous to follow Jesus. Open Doors president blasted number 1 on the list North Korea and its dictator Kim Jong-un.
Imagine in your mind a leader who thinks he is God, but acts like an animal, devouring his own people.
David Curry blames Islamic extremists for some of the world's worst abuses, especially against women.
We found 2,260 women who were forced into marriage, who were raped, who had sexual assault by Muslim extremists.
An international advocate for religious freedom said it's important to remember the persecuted, like an American pastor held in a Turkish prison.
I met with Pastor Andrew Brunson in Turkey earlier this year, and his biggest fear is to be forgotten.
A top congressional fighter for religious freedom said the U.S. does big business with many of these persecuting nations.
A lot of these are countries that we have billion-dollar agreements with. And certainly I think it's important to know that when we are sending taxpayer dollars to some of these countries that we know what is going on.
The Muslim population is growing, and in the next 2 decades, they could become the second largest religious group in the United States. The Pew Research Center combined studies they conducted in 2007, 2011, and 2017 with yearly data from the U.S. Census to construct a portrait of the future of Muslims in America. According to the data, the Muslim population is growing at an accelerated rate and will more than double from an estimated 3.45 million in 2017 to 8.1 million in 2050. Muslims are expected to surpass Jews as the second largest religious group.
A former U.S. official is saying that the administration of President Donald Trump plans to adopt a hawkish position on the use of nuclear weapons. That's according to John Wolfstall, who was a special assistant to former U.S. President Barack Obama as senior director for arms control and non-proliferation. Well, he's saying that a new nuclear posture review prepared by Pentagon looses constraints on the use of nuclear weapons and scenarios in which such weapons could be used. He says it also proposes developing small, lower-yield missiles that are easier to use. The plan is set to be published by Pentagon at the end of January. Arms control advocates have voiced the alarm at the new proposal, saying it will make a nuclear war more likely. Since taking office, Trump has been vocal in his support for nuclear weapons and an increase in the U.S. stockpile.
Now, the UK government's rejected calls for a better system of checks and balances to prevent future prime ministers making the same mistakes as Tony Blair did over Iraq. A special committee argued stricter investigations should be carried out before entering the country into any conflict. An inquiry into the war, known as the Chilcot Report, led to the establishment of the UK's National Security Council. It deals with all national security issues, coordinates the activities of the intelligence services, and formulates defence strategy. Now, the Chilcot Report was published in 2016, ruled the UK's military action in Iraq was not a last resort. The Iraqi leader, Saddam Hussein, didn't represent an urgent threat, and there was no undeniable evidence of weapons of mass destruction being used by the Iraqi government. Lindsay German from the Stop the War Coalition believes it's easy for the UK MPs to vote for war, but much harder for them to deal with the consequences.
Chilcot was meant to change the whole way in which these decisions were made. It hasn't been implemented, it hasn't been taken up, and I fear that we are going to get another episode like we've had with Tony Blair in the past. And of course it shows that this government, just like the Blair government, doesn't want to be constrained by anybody. The decision to go to war can be taken by a tiny clique of people around the Prime Minister with very little democratic accountability. And of course it's very, very easy for these MPs to vote for war. It's much, much harder to deal with the consequences of a war, as we've seen in Iraq and as we're still seeing in Afghanistan and Libya.
The German army is recruiting an increasing number of minors, according to figures from the country's defense ministry. In fact, over 2,000 teenagers are now volunteering for Germany's armed forces. That's 3 times more than 6 years ago. Germany is one of the few countries worldwide that allows under 18s to volunteer, though only in a non-combat role. Teenagers can apply if they are 17 and have parental consent. The German military is currently conducting a recruitment drive, sending officers to give talks in schools nationwide. The campaign also features an online reality show. The program follows army recruits for 12 weeks and is one of Germany's most popular online projects. It However, its role in making the military more attractive to young people has drawn criticisms. The United Nations is concerned that the recruitment drive specifically targets children. The German army has defended its methods, insisting that the training is done under strict supervision.
A thirsty Russian in Murmansk objected to the fact he couldn't get into a closed store to buy more booze, so he stole an armoured troop transport from a training camp and used it to ram-raid the local supermarket, damaging some cars in the process. Police who arrested the man said he was probably drunk.
In a meeting with ambassadors from NATO member countries in Israel on Tuesday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly warned that there is a real possibility U.S. President Donald Trump will cancel the Iran nuclear deal this week. Israel Channel 10 is reporting that Netanyahu told the ambassadors that President Trump will make a decision this week. This coming Friday, Trump will have to decide whether to sign a number of waivers that would block the renewal of sanctions removed under the nuclear deal. If he does not sign the waivers, the sanctions will automatically be reinstated, a move which the other powers who signed the deal strongly oppose.
Russia reaffirmed today its support for the Iran nuclear deal as the deadline draws near for Donald Trump to decide whether to reimpose sanctions on Tehran. At a meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif in Moscow, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said his country will continue to defend the viability of the program and its major importance in securing regional stability. Britain, France and Germany are expected to meet in Brussels on Thursday to reassure Tehran they remain committed to the nuclear deal. Lavrov says this is in the interest of regional stability.
We will continue to defend the viability of this program and its major importance in securing regional stability and solving the issues of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction.
Iran says it has arrested dozens of people on suspicion of terrorist activities during a recent wave of protests. According to a statement from the intelligence ministry, security forces confiscated arms and explosives from safe houses kept by the detainees. Demonstrations broke out across Iran last month, with protesters angry at the failing economy and official corruption. Iran has accused the United States, Israel, and other foreign powers of inciting violence to try and overthrow the Islamic Republic.
More than 200 people have been arrested in consecutive nights of widespread violence that has rocked Tunisia. The Interior Ministry says the detentions follow attacks on police stations and government buildings, as well as vandalism during anti-establishment protests. Demonstrations broke out on Sunday and have since spread to over 20 towns as people rally against new tax and price increases aimed at reducing a ballooning deficit and satisfying the North African country's foreign lenders. It's been 7 years since the Arab Spring and the government didn't do anything for us, so it's normal to protest, said this woman. I think these protests will be bigger than those in 2011 because of the major price increases. It's normal for people to demonstrate when they find it difficult to buy necessary, everyday things, this man added. While there were no protests on the southern island of Jerba, locals say people took advantage of a reduced police presence because of the rallies to hurl petrol bombs at a Jewish school, causing damage but no reported injuries.
A court ruling in Germany has provoked controversy after it refused the deportation of a Turkish jihadist. The decision's likely to also give Chancellor Merkel a headache as she continues to struggle to form a coalition government. RT Charlotte Dubensky has more details.
Well, Germany's top court has ruled on Wednesday that a person cannot be deported back to their country of origin if they face torture or inhumane treatment in that country. Now, the Turkish court has said that Germany would need to have appropriate assurances that neither of those would take place if a person was deported to that country. Now, this case has been highlighted because of a court case brought by a German-born Turk who was convicted back in 2015 of supporting terrorism. The man, who's 30 years old, had travelled to Syria and had supported a terrorist organisation in the country, including giving funds to that terrorist organisation. Now, he received a 3.5-year sentence for doing so here in Germany. But in 2016, he was threatened with deportation back to Turkey, and he decided to appeal that threat and take it to the court system here in this country. Now, he had support from groups such as Amnesty, who said that if he was deported to Turkey because he had links to a terror organisation, he could be tortured or abused.
Moving now to France, and far-right party leader Marine Le Pen says the terrorist threat has increased since Emmanuel Macron assumed power. Speaking to journalists at the National Assembly, the parliament member said the government has lowered the level of protection by ending emergency measures. Le Pen also cited the free movement of numerous Islamic State fighters who have returned to France, saying they should be tried on the spot and incarcerated with the possibility of life imprisonment.
I want to say with seriousness that if it so happens that the ghosts of the Islamic State, protected by Mr. Macron and Mr. Collomb, commit terrorist acts, we will hold them politically responsible and criminally complicit in these acts before the nation.
First fire, now water. This area of Southern California has been hit by back-to-back natural disasters.
Tonight, with the death toll relentlessly rising, the race to find at least a dozen residents still missing. Convoys of search and rescue vehicles rolling in. Rescue dogs sniffing for survivors, hitching rides on their handlers.
Oh my God, Mom!
Over 100 homes destroyed, 300 damaged. For many, the only way out was by chopper. The Coast Guard plucking this family of 5 from the debris, plus their 2 dogs.
From the ground here, you get a sense of how deep this mud is and how difficult it is for first responders. That house completely buried, but you can only see the scale of this from the air. This debris field goes down hundreds and hundreds of yards. Almost every house in its path obliterated.
Our Los Angeles station, KABC, capturing the disaster from above. All across this mudscape today, we heard the calls of the desperate.
Josie!
Family members and friends trudging in, searching for loved ones. Josie Gower's son, Hayden, inconsolable.
Why did she go downstairs?
We first met Robert Riskin Tuesday in the dark, weeping in the husk of his family home. His sister and father-in-law survived, but in the fading light, he said his mother, Rebecca, a prominent realtor, was still out there.
You know, it's my mom, and I'm fighting with all my heart to find her, but like I can't focus too much on she's most likely dead out here, you know, and just push my way through.
This morning, he was back. Family members forming a search party. The reality crushing.
We just need the rescue personnel to come down and help us look, is what we're hoping.
The Thomas Fire denuded the nearby hills of vegetation that might have absorbed the rain. And when it came, the rain was biblical.
86/100ths of an inch in 15 minutes is an unprecedented rainfall on any ground surface, much less a fire-burned watershed.
All that water surging off the bare hills, funneled into Montecito's dry creek beds. When you see the size of these boulders, it gives you a sense of the power that forces these giant rocks and these giant trees downstream. Oprah Winfrey surveying the damage to her property too.
So there used to be a fence right here. That's my neighbor's house, devastated.
The death toll now at least 17. It includes Roy Rocher, the founder of the St. Augustine Academy, swept away from his home.
A tsunami advisory has been lifted for the Caribbean and Central America after a powerful earthquake hit about 27 miles off the coast of Honduras. The U.S. Pacific Tsunami Warning Center announced January 10th that the alert had been canceled. The night before, a 7.6 magnitude earthquake occurred east of Great Swan Island. The quake hit in shallow waters about 10 kilometers below the surface. The center warned that sea levels could rise between 0.3 and 1 meter. Warnings were issued for Puerto Rico, the Cayman Islands, Cuba, Jamaica, and other Caribbean islands. The coasts of Mexico and Central America were also put under advisory. The quake was one of the most powerful ever to hit the Caribbean. However, there were no immediate reports of deaths or substantial damage to infrastructure. In 2010, a lesser magnitude quake of 7 hit Haiti, sparking several deadly tsunamis.
It's been a dramatic change in life in less than 48 hours for people on the east coast of Madagascar. Ava was the latest cyclone to hit their island. It has now subsided, but it has left them homeless, sick, and in desperate need of help.
We are 6 in our family and our house is completely submerged in water. My child had a strong fever, so we decided to come here. From morning, the moment you step down from your bed, you are forced to walk in water. Water is everywhere, and that is the reason we came here.
Cyclone Ava sped up the east coast of the island on Friday before heading out to sea on Sunday. Heavy rains and winds of up to 190 kilometers an hour left a trail of destruction. Dozens died in floods and landslides. Up to 19,000 fled to temporary shelters. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed, roads submerged, schools shut down, and towns cut off from one another by the sudden appearance of new lakes. The region of Hot Matsiatra, 400 kilometers south of the capital Antananarivo, was worst affected.
We asked the state to come and see what we are going through and to look at our situation and find a solution to clear out the water, but it is stagnant and we don't know where to put our children.
African swine fever is becoming a cause for concern in Germany as new cases break out in neighbouring Poland and the Czech Republic. They're just 2 of 6 EU countries to be affected. Experts say the spread is being accelerated, among other things, by the collection of food scraps from motorway service stations. While not harmful to humans, the disease is almost always fatal for pigs and wild boar, and there's currently no vaccine against it. Animal health research body the Friedrich Loeffler Institute has labelled the situation alarming.
Tonight, a dangerous strain of the flu is hitting the nation hard. The CDC says the H3N2 strain is causing one of the worst seasons in recent history.
This virus tends to affect older people, so over 65, and very young, under a year.
19-month-old Nathaniel Downey of Toledo, Ohio, died Monday from the flu. The family says he suddenly started coughing and within an hour couldn't breathe. Even the seemingly fit can be affected. This 21-year-old aspiring to be a personal trainer died. The family says a simple cold turned into a serious flu. We showed his photo to the doctor. He says cases like these are very rare and he'd need to know more, but that any age group can catch the flu.
It's certainly an awful and it's a scary story. When you're looking at the overall numbers of people in his age group, this person isn't necessarily at increased risk of adverse outcomes.
Tonight, the CDC still urging people to get the flu shot, even though it's only estimated to be 30% effective against this year's main flu strain.
The popular painkiller ibuprofen can damage men's ability to have children, according to a new joint Danish and French study. The scientists found that when taken regularly for up to 6 weeks, the drug can cause damage to the male hormone in the testicles, meaning they're less likely to be able to conceive. The doctors in Copenhagen also witnessed other health problems, such as erectile dysfunction, fatigue and muscle wastage. Some of the conditions would normally be associated with older men and smokers, but the group taking part in the study was aged 18 to 35. They took 600 milligrams of ibuprofen twice a day. The researchers said the disorder was mild and short-lived, but that there was a risk it could become permanent in longer-term users.
Makers XL Medical announced Monday the FDA has approved a new clinical platform for hospital staff. It uses an algorithm to predict and prevent sudden patient death and is called the WAVE Clinical Platform. The system monitors patient vitals and sends alerts to connected smart devices up to 6 hours before a patient suffers a potentially fatal heart attack or respiratory failure. This is the first such algorithm to receive FDA approval. According to a 2013 study in the Journal of Patient Safety, as many as 400,000 people a year die in hospitals prematurely.
Step on up! These penguins had no problem hopping on the scale, so zookeepers could record their weight. Some even jumped on before their turn. It didn't hurt there was a little reward at the end. Keepers enticed the penguins with tiny fish to keep the line moving, which was probably what had them so excited. And this gray seal pup tested the waters before getting on the scale with his mom. At less than a month old, the little guy already weighs 100 pounds. He weighed 36 at birth, but thanks to his mom's fatty milk, he's healthily packing on the pounds. Blubber is a great insulator, and by the looks of it, makes for great cuddles.